why are you interested in running for board?
I've got a few answers for this. The first one is very cliche. I've just seen how, positive and beautiful and rewarding all of those experiences and interactions with the USU can be. I remember when I started out at uni, the first few months I didn't get involved in much at all. And I kind of wasn't in a good place. My mental health was not fantastic. And later, when I did get involved in that sort of stuff, clubs and societies, my life was just like, okay, this is much better. This is a lot more fun. And I'm not perfect yet, but it's improved me so much. And just the opportunities that the USU offers. Like, as a young woman who's really hungry for those opportunities, it's just the world is your oyster. From meeting friends on the bus to first year arts camp to watching them create passions and start their own clubs and societies, which is really wonderful. Another point is, with the wonderful help of the SRC last year, I was able to attend NatCon in Ballarat, which is the national conference of the National Union of Students. And I had, oh my gosh, my cat going crazy, but I had no idea what was happening that whole time. But I just remember sitting in that room, watching so many passionate students actually creating change and as a blanket statement doing really, really good things. And it was just a huge inspiring moment to see that change happening. And finally, a point that's a bit more personal for me, I remember seeing the elections last year, actually seeing you, Ellie, and Irene running as these really passionate second year women. And I remember distinctly thinking to myself, wow, I could absolutely never do that. That is so brave. Never in a million years could I do that. And now I'm doing that, which is something I'm quite proud of myself for.
That's a beautiful answer. Awesome. How would you describe the role of a board director?
How would I describe a board director? I'd first like to describe, thank you. I'd first like to describe a board director as just a regular student. They're still a regular student. They're a regular club member. They could be a club executive, but there's nothing really that distinguishes them that much from just a normal member of the USU. What does distinguish them is that drive and that sense of hard work and responsibility. And in my case, I feel like it's kind of a natural sense of giving back, kind of a debt that I owe to the student organization. That's improved me personally so much.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to get to a bit more of the nitty-gritty questions now.
Sure.
Okay. What are 3 of your policies and why are they your favorite?
My 3 favorite policies. Okay. I'd like to start with the con. I think I'm the only con candidate, or at least in memory. I'd like Oni to try to prove me wrong with that so I don't have to do the research. Yeah, I've been attending the con since I was 5. I had to check that with my mom. So it's been a huge part of my life. So I've been there for so many years. And just to finally have that group of students properly represented would be absolutely phenomenal. You see them have like these tokenistic policies every year where they're like, oh, we'd like a cafe at the con. But what they don't understand is we kind of have our own campus culture already that's specific to our needs and wants and our objectives as music students. We already have our cafe that we want. We have Rusty who knows everyone's coffee order and it's absolutely phenomenal. So with the con, I would like to extend all these existing student programs to the con. It's just a lot of people at the con actually don't even know what the USU is. I was having a conversation with a friend and she was like, University of Sydney undergraduates? And I was like, no, that's not correct, but good try. It's those things like the language exchange program, which already exists, but just extending it to the con for those classical singers who are trying to learn so many different languages to supplement their degree seems like a very, very logical thing to do. And creating some performance opportunities as well, which already exist. You see them happening in Herman's and at Courtyard very casually. That'd be such a great performance opportunity for a lot of jazz and contemporary degree students at the con. So yeah, that's really important to me. Aside from the con, another huge part of my involvement with the USU has been through CNS. And something I've been watching that has been really fabulous, this also applies to the con, is the fabulous innovation and creativity of individuals in this obviously quite different time. Just the fact that these people have made such amazing things happen without being able to see a single another person face to face has been so incredible. And that innovation needs to be rewarded when it gets back to business as normal. We need to well and truly support our clubs and societies, especially small clubs and societies who will find it more difficult to come back after this period. I think we need to give them the tools to really improve these societies, such as specific training, mental health training, first aid training, and sexual assault disclosure training, which is for a lot of individuals just not financially viable. I've looked into getting it myself, and just as an individual, I straight up could not afford it. The cheapest mental health training I could find is $50 and out of pocket. That's just not acceptable. I think that needs to be provided by the USU. And first aid training with St. John's Ambulance can cost almost $200, which is also a great deal of money. And also with CNS, something that exists that is quite prohibitive is also the university's alcohol policy, which absolutely decimates happy hour as we know it. We've never seen a 1 hour happy hour. That doesn't exist. It has to be 2 hours. And that's personal to me as well. And like, there's just so many, maybe it comes from a good sentiment, but it's written from such an outsider's perspective. Like, as students, it's a huge part of what we come to university for, and just destroying happy hour as we know it is completely unacceptable. And finally, I feel like that was more than 3 things.
The con, clubs and societies.
And let's go with, yeah, recovery kind of feeds into everything there, but a huge mindset I have is kind of going from that rescue plan, which we've seen the USU covering in the past couple of months, to a recovery plan, because things are starting to turn around, and I'm sure we'll hear more information from the university soon. But there is a sentence in the USU's 2017 to 2020 strategic plan that says that we need to be, we need to be adaptive to any changes in the university's academic and physical environment. And I think that is a highly relevant, well, obviously no one could like foreshadow what's happening right now, but that is quite highly relevant. And it ties into one of the Australian government's earlier releases on the Australian health sector emergency response plan to novel coronavirus or something like that, which talks about continuing to engage, empower, and build confidence in the community, which is a really important mindset to bring to all of the USU's actions and especially financial decisions that will be made throughout the coming term.
Awesome, great answer. Okay, so the USU is currently facing unprecedented financial stress due to the loss of revenue related to COVID-19. If you had to, what would you cut from the USU's current operations, and how do you think the USU should economize?
All the candidates are kind of in the same boat here, how we're kind of not privy to the same financial documents that the current board directors have access to, or the most recent document we have is the 2018 financial report from May 2018 or something, which is not very recent, and it's also very vague in its terms in there. So it's a difficult question to give an answer to, but I can tell you I would not be cutting anything from CNS. I would not be cutting anything from student programs. What I would perhaps like to reassess is incubate and which organization that the program really serves the most.
Cool. And what is one thing that you think the USU has done well during your time at uni?
Apart from those wonderful festivals that we see as such, well, we did see as such like a vibrant representation of student life, I think there's been a bit of controversy, yes, about how they've dealt with the whole coronavirus situation, but there is no fairy tale solution. So I'm quite proud of how they've handled it all.
Awesome. And then what about one thing that you think the USU has done poorly during your time at uni?
I was trying to look through what the USU actually like significantly achieved during especially 2019, and it was a little difficult to find like some standout sparkling fireworks announcement. So I reckon they've been a little lackluster over the past year or so. So I'll put that out there.
All right. How political should the USU be?
How political should the USU be? I believe the USU must be a progressive organization, but I don't believe it is inherently political. It has a responsibility to project a progressive image, and it will like inevitably on events with that with a relatively political message, such as Pride Fest and being like environmentally conscious down that avenue. Whereas you can see that the SRC has an obviously more political role. The USU must deal with what I like to think of as sort of the crossroads between progressive morality and politics.
All right, next question. What is an example of something you'd support and something you wouldn't?
That's quite vague, if I do say so myself.
Regarding politics, then.
Sorry?
Regarding the politics of the USU, the politics.
The politics of the USU. Good question. I think we need to listen to what the student body and the members of the USU decide are the most like important and pressing causes of the current day. I think that really is up to what the voices of the general members are saying. Because a board director is like a representative of the student body. I'm trying to think of specific examples. Ooh. It's so hard to think of specific things.
We can circle back.
Are we good at it?
Okay. What is one controversial decision, that the USU made was to allow the registration of Life Choice, an anti-abortion group as a club. Many people oppose this on the basis of its potential impacts on students who have had an abortion. Mm-hmm. What's your position on how the USU should approach controversial clubs and societies?
Mm-hmm. The dangerous thing here is in future years, if we have a more right-wing leaning USU board, how they might choose to repress left-wing progressive voices through decisions that the board makes now is always a fine line to draw. Obviously, I think that sort of pro-life rhetoric is kind of disgusting, and I would personally not like to see that in this university society at all, but it is a fine line as to how much we can repress the freedom of students. In that specific example, as it should be a kind of case-by-case thing, I would completely oppose the creation of that kind of society.
Good answer. So board directors have a fiduciary duty to the USU, which means that you have to put the board's interest above your own and can be sued for acting against its interests. If something egregiously bad was happening in the USU, would you consider leaking it out? And if not, what would you do?
Ooh. Egregiously bad, that's a nice phrase. I would be completely, very, very hesitant to breach those duties. And there would be very, very few circumstances in which I would consider it. Yeah, I don't think it is my place to leak that sort of information, as the board itself is a whole representative body, and making up a part of it is not licensed to do that sort of thing.
Okay. Do you think the USU is doing enough to support the international student community at this time? And if yes, what programs, initiatives programs/initiatives do you find to be particularly successful? If not, how could the USU better support international students?
This question has changed a lot since last year in the grand scheme of things. Something I'm very passionate about is genuine experience. And as I don't have that genuine experience as an international student, it's very hard for me to speak on that topic. My policy statement doesn't outline any international student policies, as I'd rather support policies for international students made by international students. The current situation, I don't think that we've done enough to really support our international students in fostering that sense of community. Obviously, it's very hard to support connection as a more broad concept in this time. But I think more could be done to foster that international outreach right now.
Okay. If elected, let me get the wording of this right. If you are elected as board member, how will you ensure that student feedback is taken into consideration when making decisions?
Oh, plain and simple. Just listen to what the students want. Yeah, getting on board isn't suddenly a bye-bye, you're segregated from the rest of the student body. You're still a regular member of the student body. And it literally becomes the job of a board director to listen to what the students around them are saying. So I think that's quite a simple answer. And you just, if someone has something to say, it's your job to listen to it.
Okay. How will you ensure that the USU caters to all USyd students?
This is something I am also quite passionate about. And again, I can only speak from my story and where I come from. So for example, the con has never been brought into this, and I'd really like to bring the con into that. So that's the direction I'm coming from. As a young woman of color, I understand what it's like to be spoken over, and especially during this time of crisis, I understand that, like, rightfully so, we'll be looking at the bigger picture. But there's obviously these nuanced stories that are going to be swept under the rug, and I think that absolutely cannot happen. So again, it's about amplifying these voices that tend to be forgotten, and really developing some avenues for connection for those voices.
So given that the USU has asked to be involved in the selection of the next VC, Vice Chancellor, what do you think Michael Spencer's replacement should be like?
Interesting. Straight up, I'd like it to be a woman. I think that'd be fabulous. We've kind of seen a similar sort of avenue in the appointment of a new CEO last year for the USU. I think that progressive change, putting a woman in the top job, is very exciting. Like, she's got more time to prove herself, but I think that was a lovely decision, and I like what she's done so far. So I think that would be a nice thing for the university to look at. And we've also seen the success of empathetic leadership during this time. So I think that'd be a nice hint for the university as well.
So which candidates would you most like to work with? Which would you least like to work with? And do you have any preference deals with any of them?
In terms of preference deals, there's nothing really going on yet. This question came up in the ONI interviews, except they phrased it as who's your favorite and who is your least favorite. And I was like, well, that's really mean. I didn't want to talk about that. In terms of who I'd like to work with, good question. I'd be really open to working with. I'm dying. Okay.
Drink the coffee. We need the coffee.
That did not help at all. But I'd be really open to working with anyone. I think that's an important part of a board director, to be able to work with anyone on your team. Teamwork is a really big part of that. I guess if I had to give an answer, I've been working with Nick Rigby recently in SAS, and we've gotten on really well. I think we create good things together. And we're supporting each other through this whole process as friends, which is really nice. We just send each other like really bad childhood photos for some reason. Who else? And Ruby Watts. I met her on arts camp, which was a really nice time last year. And I think we're kind of emitting a similar vibe of sort, which is nice. And I would like to work with her. I really don't want to say who I'd least like to work with. I feel like that's mean.
Okay. We won't grill you, that's okay. So do you have a manager?
Yes, it is Belinda Thomas.
And what color are you running under?
I'm running under red.
Oh, nice. And you've worn it today. Love that. Do you want to circle back to the example of something you would support and something you wouldn't regarding politics?
Regarding politics? The first thing that comes to mind is Pride Fest. I love Pride Fest. It's amazing. And I'm going to use an example that you already use. I wouldn't support that that pro-life society.
Mm-hmm. Fair. Okay. Do we have any follow-up questions, girls?
Yeah, just a couple. So I thought I'd just ask a follow-up on that kind of good or bad politics thing. So I think, yeah, definitely very reasonable to support Pride Week and not Life Choice. I would definitely agree on that one. I was just wondering, what do you think is the role in terms of engaging of the USU in terms of engaging with like USID and government policy? Because at the USU meeting before last, basically Pulp asked the USU board whether they would be interested in kind of joining the SRC campaign on things like housing rights for students and stuff like that, and like mark concessions during COVID. And they basically said like they'd be happy to support something once the SRC has got it up and running, but they don't really think it's the place for the USU to be involved so much in lobbying the government and the university. Do you sort of agree with that sentiment, or do you think the USU should sometimes take a like more of a stake in questions like that?
I agree with most of it. I do think the USU should take a stake in it, yes, but I don't think the USU should be the leading voice in that situation. I think the SRC should still be the leading voice. I think that is sort of more of the role of the SRC, but the USU should definitely be supporting it. I like to see the USU lobbying the university, especially because of that close affiliation, obviously. But I would like to see the USU supporting the SRC in lobbying those other governmental bodies.
Cool, good answer. I was also interested to hear more about why you thought Incubate might be a good program to cut, I guess if you had to, and kind of the logic behind that, yeah.
There are other sort of innovation entrepreneurship hubs at universities around the country. I remember exactly which, not right now, no, but and those hubs are funded by the universities themselves rather than, for example, student unions. And I think those projects are, in a basic sense, serving the university more than they are serving the USU. And I think when it comes to it, I'd rather see the USU's money go towards clubs and societies and directly supporting student life, which affects all of its members, rather than a program which affects a much smaller number of its members.
Great, yeah. Next question is just following up on the not leaking stuff. So yeah, good plan not to get sued. If you were sort of faced with that kind of situation where something sort of really immoral or like something you thought was really not in the interest of the USU was going on behind the scenes, how do you think you could sort it out within the board or negotiate disagreement with other board directors?
Well, hopefully the other board members would have a pretty decent sense of morality as well when it comes to it. Yeah, I think sorting it out within the board would definitely be the way to go, rather than taking the step to leak information to the general populace. yeah, I think that just falls on the shoulders of the rest of the board having a decent sense of morality.
Cool. And then finally, just so you mentioned how the USU should be sort of investigating a recovery plan to get out of COVID-19 related financial difficulties. I was wondering what role sort of student life and engagement will have in that, because things like, for instance, Manning have been really declining over the years. There's a lot less student engagement than there has been in the past. Do you have any ideas about how to sort of reinvigorate that?
Well, specifically, it definitely starts, it sounds abstract, but with the mindset first, from rescue to recovery. It's a really important sense of resilience to have, that we must have, sorry. And it's kind of when we get back to business as normal, it's all hands on deck. And I had that point about encouraging the innovation and creativity that the individual clubs and society executives have had so far. A lot of individuals in the creative arts have had to have absolutely brilliant ideas to keep their practices going. And I think listening to what those individuals have had to say, since they have had very loud and exciting and creative voices in this time of crisis, will be absolutely essential to see where this bigger organization can go in getting us back on track.
Great, thanks. Those are all my questions. Does anyone else have any follow-up questions?
I just have a couple. So obviously you discussed student feedback and how, it's the role of a board member to listen to students. And I'm just wondering, especially, as this semester, a lot of students obviously aren't on campus, and there are quite a few students who don't regularly come into campus and those sorts of things. How do you have any more specific mechanisms that you would use to gain feedback from students that may not be in your circles, or may not be in contact with the uni all the time?
I think a lot of contemporary communication channels, such as straight up social media, should be utilized in that sort of effort, and just really making an effort to ask for feedback about the USU and what a lot of students would like to see, and gets just regular members involved in furthering the USU. Literally slide into the DMs, send a Facebook message. That's a really accessible way for students to get around it, and how we can get probably the most voices involved in the future of the USU.
Cool. And also you mentioned that, for 2019, you couldn't really see any sort of standout actions by the USU. Can you elaborate a little bit on, sort of what you think they could have done better in 2019?
Good question. Like, I do think they did a decent job. They got the ball rolling. All the festivals were quite exciting. There was good innovation there. But I guess it's just compared to like universal free access the other year, how that was like a huge firework. I guess there were big shoes to fill in that regard. Yeah, I feel like there are things where they just almost would have gotten to those moments per se. It's hard to think of a specific one. It's kind of like, okay, it's like the welcome to uni party last year is the only example of this year I can kind of think of how I waited in the line for so long, but I didn't get in because it was so packed. It was apparently such a good time. But I did get a quarter of a chicken sandwich standing in that line. So I can't really complain, actually. Yeah, and obviously the con isn't just an issue from last year, it's an issue from a while ago, how we literally just don't have the outreach and the connection of the USU, and we can really do with that over there, but done in the right way.
Okay, cool. That's all that I have.
Awesome. Okay, I think that's it then.
Thank you.
Too good. Thank you.
All right. Oh, that's all good.
Hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
Good luck.